Hey everyone, it's Monique here, and I'm back with another video. In today's video, I really want to talk about what to expect your first year of law school. So stay tuned and we're going to get into the details. So the old saying of the first year of law school, they scare you to death, couldn't be more true. Your first year of law school, your professors really are going to be hard on you. The first year, the saying goes, they scare you to death. The second year, they work you to death. And the third year, they bore you to death. I know that sounds cliche, and it actually is cliche, but it is the truth. So, your first year is really the year where the professors try to weed out people from the class. When I first started law school, one of my professors said, look to your left, look to your right. By the end of the semester, those people probably won't be here. And that actually was the case when I went to law school, because the first year is really the year where professors and deans really try to see who's in it for the long run, who's capable of pushing through and actually getting through the process. And so, your first year, you're expected to do a lot of reading. You're expected to really come out of your shell your first year. You're pushed to your limit your first year. I guess the idea is if you can handle the first year, you can handle the next 2 years. And so you take the foundational courses your first year. Well, at least at my school, I took foundational courses, which were there was 2 semesters. So the first semester I took contracts, constitutional law, and torts. And then the second semester, I ended up taking criminal law, criminal procedure, and real property, I believe. So those were the 6 foundational courses that all of the first years or 1Ls took. And the professors, even though they were different, they all had similar styles. And when I mean similar styles, I mean they all implemented the Socratic Method. And for those of you who want to go to law school and aren't familiar with the Socratic Method, I'm going to take some time in this video to kind of go over what that method is all about and what it means. So the Socratic Method is essentially a teaching style that forces the student to engage in class discussion. You know, generally and traditionally in college or higher learning courses, the teacher or professor lectures the student. And then after the lecture, there's some sort of testing. Well, with the Socratic Method, it's a little bit different. As opposed to the professor or the teacher standing up in the front of the class and lecturing, that professor or teacher gets up in the front of the class and requires participation and engagement from the student by asking particular questions based off whatever assignment was given. For example, if you're assigned specific cases to read and brief, let's say in your torts class, the following day or the following week, however many times you have that class in that week, your professor generally gets up at the front of the class and says, okay, the reading was X, Y, and Z, and then starts calling on people. And with the Socratic Method, the way in which a student is called upon is random. So typically, the professor has a list of names, which is the roll sheet, and we'll go down that list and we'll start calling out names, and we'll expect that student that's called upon to brief the case. Now, that professor may not expect that student to give the facts, procedural history, issue, rule, and analysis all at once, but may ask a particular question about the facts, may ask a particular question about the holding of the court. I mean, it depends on what the professor wants to get from that particular student, but the idea is the professor's not getting up there and briefing the case for you. You're briefing the case for the professor and the entire class. Now, that doesn't sound too bad, right? That's easy enough. If I did the reading and I brief the case, I should be able to talk about it in class. Yeah, that's not necessarily all that's involved in the Socratic Method and briefing cases or talking about the assignment in front of the class. A lot of times these professors and teachers will expect a deeper understanding of the material. So it won't just be what are the facts of the case. A lot of times these professors and teachers are really trying to see if you understood the principle behind the case and why we read the case and what we're trying to learn from, or what they wanted you to learn from reading the case. And so they'll ask really, really intricate, specific questions about the case to see if you actually read it or if you went online and found a case brief summary. Because with a lot of these cases and these case books, you're able to find the briefs online. And professors, they don't like when students go online and print out canned briefs that are already summarized for you and on the internet. And so in order to determine who prepared a canned brief and who actually did the reading, these professors will ask intricate, detailed questions and expect an answer. And, it's so funny because I think, at least with first year students, they think that they're sometimes smarter than the professor or they can outsmart the professor. And so what they'll do is they go in assuming that all they're going to be asked is the procedural history, the facts, the analysis, the rule, the holding, and the conclusion. No, that's too simple. This is law school. This is higher education learning. And so it's not going to be that simple. And so they'll go in confident. Oh, I can brief the case, professor, and they'll volunteer and everything. And then when the professor starts asking these intricate questions, they can't answer them. And then that shows not only the professor that you didn't read the case, but it's also showing the class. You kind of make an example of yourself to the class by doing that. And so you want to make sure that you're actually reading the cases. And a lot of these cases are really long. Sometimes the cases are 50 pages or more. Sometimes they're less. It just really depends on the case that you are being assigned to, that you're being assigned and that you're reading. But you want to make sure you read everything because it's not just going to be what are the facts? What is the procedural history? What's the issue? They'll start off by asking you that, but then the professor's going to ask more detailed questions. And you don't want to embarrass yourself by not having an understanding of what really is happening in the case. It's so much more than just the facts. These cases are so much more than just the procedural history. The professor's asking you certain questions because it's going to lead you down the path of the real reason why you read the case. For example, it's important to know the procedural history because it's important to know what happened prior to where the case is currently at in the textbook that you're reading. A lot of these times these cases will be on appeal and they'll be either at the Court of Appeals level or at the Supreme Court level. And so if you just tell me what the facts are of the case, but you don't know what the procedural history is, then you're not really telling me anything. I need to know, and these professors are going to want to know, essentially the professors want to know, where are we at in this case? So what happened previously? And what was the end result at the trial court level? How did we get to the Court of Appeals? And so you're not going to gain that information by printing out or reading a canned brief summary online because they're just giving you a synopsis, a basic summary of what happened at the Court of Appeals level or whatever level the case ended up being at. But you also need to get that information. You also need the background information of where the case started from. So if you don't read the textbook and you just print out a case brief, you're not going to have that understanding. The professor's going to be able to spot that a mile away. And you're not only going to look bad in the eyes of the professor, but your classmates are going to look at you differently as well. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you're reading every part of the case. So aside from understanding that the Socratic Method will be implemented by your professors, it's also important to understand that a lot of your classmates have various motives and reasons for going to law school. And I say it's important to understand that because you'll understand where some people are coming from and the competitive nature of law school. So I think in a previous video, I talked about how when I first went to law school, I didn't realize that some of the students in my class had already done some courses in law school in the past, and so they had a little bit of an advantage of knowing what to expect when going to law school because they had done it before, and maybe they were finishing up or they were redoing a certain course because they failed it previously. I talked about how it was important for me to understand that, or I wish I would have known that previously because I would have been a little bit more gracious upon myself. But it's also important to understand that because it gives you an idea or a sense of the motivation behind a lot of people's reasoning in going into law school. And so there will be some individuals in your class who've done law school before. There will be some individuals in your class who have other careers in law. The law profession is not the only career that they're pursuing or have pursued. And so it's important to know that because then you get an understanding of how bad somebody wants it. It's also important to know and have an understanding of the individual backgrounds of people in your class. Some people have 3, 4 kids and are single parents, and so they're more motivated maybe than a single person who has no responsibility, still living at home, and this is their first time career. Not saying that's the case, but maybe it is for the next person that's in your class who has a family and it's do or die time and trying to provide because they have individuals at home who are expecting that from them. And so it's really important to get that basic understanding if you can, just so you kind of realize what you're dealing with certain individuals. In my experience with law school, I found that a lot of students in my class were competitive because they had people counting on them, whether that was a spouse or child or parent they were taking care of, and so they wanted it really bad. And there were some people in my class who were willing to do anything to achieve the top ranking in the class, the highest grade, teacher's favor. And so once I understood that, it gave me an opportunity to determine who I wanted to get close with and who I didn't want to get close with. Because while I understood everybody's motivation in going to law school, I also didn't want to put myself in peril or put myself in connection with another person who really didn't have an interest in me doing well and was only interested in being at the top of the class and would do anything to get on another person's back or put another person down to get there, if that makes sense. And so it's important to understand the motivation and what drives people in law school in terms of the students. And it's also important to understand that most students in your class are going to be competitive. They're not asking you what grades you got on a certain exam because they care. They're asking you because they're trying to figure out where they fit in the class. And so it's important to understand that so that you can proceed accordingly, whether that is to get close with that person and bring them into your study group or stay away from that person because you don't trust that they won't step on you to get ahead. That's really important. Most people who go to graduate school are competitive because right out of graduate school, you're looking at trying to get a job. And, graduate school is really expensive. And I'm sure everybody, if not everybody, most people want to get a good job right out of graduate school so that they can pay off whatever loans they took to go to graduate school. So there will be very competitive people in your class some who care about you as a person and want to help you and want to work with you, and some who really don't. Some who just want to step on you to get ahead. So it's important to know that that is going to be the case. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not saying that so that you can go into law school jaded and not willing to give anybody a chance. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying be aware that you're in graduate school. When you go to law school, that's graduate school, and there are going to be people, some people who are older than you, some people who are younger than you, and everybody's going to have a different motivation in going. And so you just want to be aware of that so you can proceed accordingly, whether that is being vulnerable with that person, like I said, and bringing them into your study group and your small circle, or staying away from that person because you can't trust what they say. I mean, there were people in my class that would say they got one grade on an exam, and then when the grades were posted, that grade wasn't even on there, and they were just completely lying. And so they were just trying to stunt on other people to make it seem like they were at the top of the class when really they weren't. So everybody's motivation is different, but it is by large a competitive graduate program. And so you just want to be aware of that so you know where you fit in and how to move from there. You also want to realize that with your first year of law school, it's a marathon. It seems like an eternity. It really is not. But it is a long, grueling process. Like I said in the beginning of this video, the first year of law school, your professor is trying to scare you to death because they're trying to get you prepared for what that workforce is going to be as soon as you get out of law school. And if you can't handle that first year, you're not going to be able to make it to the second year, and surely won't be able to get through the third year. And so it is a marathon. It's mentally and physically and emotionally exhausting. Now, it is worth it in the end. And if you can get through that first year, you can get through the second and the third year. But I remember with me in my first year, I was so drained emotionally, physically, and mentally every single day. When I say I got through my first year of law school with blood, sweat, and tears, that is literally the truth. I wasn't used to that type of environment. And even if you are used to that type of environment where people are hard on you and have high expectations from you and don't really care if they're hurting your feelings, it's still a different type of environment because you're dealing with all of that on top of trying to grasp this dense, difficult material. And so you have to be prepared for that. Law school really is not for the weak. It's not for the wary. It's not for those who are hesitant. You got to be a strong person. And, even if you aren't initially that emotionally strong person going into law school, it will build character. But I just want you to know that it is a marathon. It is draining in every sense of the word. It is hard. It's not easy by any means necessary. I mean, it's not easy by any means. And so you just need to be prepared for that. It may come easier for some people, just like other subjects and different careers and things like that are easier for other people, but it's still not easy. You still got to put in a lot of time. It's a lot of reading, it's a lot of work, it's showing up every single day, it's being tested continuously. So it is a lot of work, it is a long process, it is a marathon. You just take it in stride. There will be times, I'm sure, where you feel like giving up. You don't want to do it. You feel like it's too difficult. You feel like you're not understanding. Keep going. Keep pushing. That's normal. I went through it. Most people go through it, especially if you've never been exposed to the legal career or legal definitions or anything legally related in terms of learning. It's going to be a just totally different world for you, but don't give up. Keep going. I think I've said this before. Prior to going to law school, I didn't know anything about the law. I didn't know anything about the practice of law. I didn't know legal definitions. I didn't know what things meant. I didn't know what actually went into being a lawyer, what was going to be expected of me in law school. I wish I would have watched some videos so I would have had somewhat of an understanding. But if I can get through it not having any of that information, not knowing anything about the law, not having anybody in my family or a close circle of friends who were exposed to that could have helped me, could have helped facilitate the transition. If I can do it, you guys can do it as well. So to sum it all up, just know your first year of law school, you are going to be scared to death, but that's typical. Professors are going to be hard on you. It's kind of going to be like boot camp. Or if anybody's ever been in the military or watched military videos, it's kind of like that. You're called by your last name, they stay on you. Um, you can't slack. There's no slacking, absolutely no slacking. I don't even care. Even if you go to a big school, there's no slacking. And I went to a little school, so there definitely was no time for anybody in the class to slack, because you were going to get caught up at some point. At some point, you were going to get called on. At some point, you were going to get called out. And so just be prepared for that. But don't let it break you. It might bend you a little bit because you're not used to it, but don't let it break you. And you can't take it personal. It's not personal. This is literally their jobs. It's their job to figure out who can handle this and who can't. And honestly, it'll make you a better person and ultimately attorney if you decide to take the bar exam, if you can get through it. So don't take it personal. Expect to be called upon. Expect to put in a lot of hours in terms of understanding the material. Expect people to disappoint you. Expect people not to have the best motives all of the time. Remember, this is graduate school. People have families. People want to gain the top ranking. People want to get good jobs. And so there are some people who will do whatever they need to do to get there. It's not high school. It's not college. This is graduate school. I'm not saying it's right, but some people feel like this is do or die time. And so expect that. And just expect to put in the work. And if you go in knowing what's expected of you, you will have no problems. You will do just fine. You will get through your first year of law school. You'll get through your second year. And by the time you get to your third year, you will be so bored, but ready to take the bar exam to become an attorney. Because honestly, I truly feel as though if you were able to get through law school, you know everything you need to know to become an attorney. Now, the practice of law is different than schooling, than law school. Those are two totally different things. And I'll have a video explaining the difference between the two, because law school does not prepare you for the practice of law. But law school does get you to where you need to be to become an attorney, because everything that you learn in law school will be tested on that bar exam. Now, the bar exam does not equate to the practice of law. And like I said, that's going to be a totally different video, but it will get you to where you need to be to become that attorney. So stay tuned for the next video. I thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.